Hello and welcome to Network Africa on Channels Television with me, Cynthia Are. It's been 5 days since Burkina Faso experienced a coup that has not only been condemned by the international community, but has also cost the country its membership at the African Union. As things stand now, the Prime Minister, who was detained along with the interim president last Thursday, has regained his freedom. But that does not mean that things are back to normal. Burkina Faso's General Gilbert Diendere insists he remains the head of a military junta that seized the country and staged a coup last week, even though the world is waiting to see what will come out of a summit of West African leaders being held in Nigeria's capital territory, Abuja. Several of ECOWAS heads of states and government officials are in attendance with President Muhammadu Buhari as the host. The main item on the agenda of the summit is the current political situation in Burkina Faso. Well, joining us to analyze this situation further is African news analyst Mr. Warwick Onyema. He joins us from London. Mr. Onyema, thank you very much for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Now, what do you think the outcome of this ECOWAS summit that has actually been put together concerning the Burkina Faso coup will actually lead to? Do you think much will come out of it?
No, I don't. I think some bland statement will be made condemning what has happened, but no practical steps will be taken that will reverse the situation that currently obtains.
Now, just before I ask you let me just put this straight up to you then. Since you're saying that you don't think much might come out of the ECOWAS summit, what steps do you think should be taken at this point that could lead to an improvement of the situation, especially now that the general is refusing to back down?
Well, he's got to be forced out. I mean, the most punitive sanctions imaginable that can be applied to any one country should now be considered. And it really means cutting the country off from any access to any aid from any country anywhere in the world. That is the kind of thing that will focus the mind of our good general to make him realize he can't just act anyhow he likes and oust the established popular government.
But Mr. Onyema, so that is one thing which some analysts often say, whether when countries are sanctioned or you try to hurt them in the pocket, that usually tends to, fire back at the country. For instance, what we're seeing in Burundi, we'll be looking at that later on in the program, but things are looking very dire concerning the economic situation. So is sanctions the only way forward, or could there be an alternative that could hurt the country less?
I don't know about hurting the country, but I mean, you can always attempt some form of mediation. But let's be honest, that has already been tried by two of the presidents of West African states, Senegal and Benin. They have met with this Diendere fellow and have had discussions with him and have come out with what they considered a compromise. But the compromise was so completely one-sided that it could hardly be regarded as a useful mediation at all.
And just if I let you go, just to look at both sides, according to the statement, like what we're talking about yesterday, the soldiers that staged the coup ahead of the elections planned for October 11th are said to be angry at the transitional regime's ban on any candidate who had supported Compaoré in his bid to extend his 27-year rule before he was ousted by a popular uprising at the end of 2014. My question is that a good enough reason to see what we're seeing unfold in Burkina Faso today?
Well, if you mean, is that a good enough reason for the military to behave in the way it has done? Yeah. The answer is, of course not. It is a reversal of the order of things. The military should be subject to the government of the day and not the other way around, which is what Diendere seems to think should obtain. Yes, you're quite right. His reason for staging this coup is because he feels that Blaise Compaoré, who was a personal friend and to whom he was very much allied, should not only should his friends and allies be allowed to contest the election. They're all totally discredited people, by the way, but that Compaoré himself should be allowed to return and contest it himself. This is totally unacceptable to the people of Burkina Faso, who breathed a sigh of relief when the man went into exile after 27 useless years with him as the leader.
Well, Mr. Warwick Onyema, thank you so much for your analysis. We appreciate your time as always. Thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
You're welcome, Cynthia. Let's see how this one turns out.
Hopefully it turns out for the better. Mr. Warwick Onyema, Africa News analyst, speaking with us from London.